At 75, Bishop Noel Jones, one of the most celebrated pastors in America, faces an unprecedented crisis. His church, once a symbol of faith and community, has collapsed, leaving thousands questioning his leadership and integrity. How did a man so revered lose the trust of so many? And is this the beginning of the end for Bishop Jones's spiritual empire? Stay with me, because the full story behind this shocking downfall is far more complex and controversial than anyone expected. Bishop Noel Jones has been a towering figure in the world of ministry for decades, known for his powerful sermons, influential leadership, and his role as a spiritual guide to thousands. His name has long been synonymous with faith and authority. But today the story is different. Recent events have shaken his church to its very foundation, leaving congregants confused, disappointed, and, in many cases, deeply mistrustful. In this video, we're going to take a deep dive into the rise and shocking fall of Bishop Noel Jones's church. You'll hear about the financial troubles, leadership controversies, and the decisions that led to a loss of confidence among his followers. We'll also explore how personal choices and public perception collided to create a crisis that no one saw coming. By the end of this video, you'll have the full picture, factual, detailed, and completely unfiltered. And trust me, what we uncover in the next few minutes will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about this prominent spiritual leader. Before the controversy, Bishop Noel Jones was a figure of inspiration and admiration. Born in 1950 in Jamaica, he moved to the United States at a young age and quickly made a name for himself in the world of ministry. Over the decades, he became the senior pastor of the City of Refuge Church in Gardena, California, and his sermons drew thousands of devoted followers. People admired him not just for his eloquence, but for his ability to connect with individuals on a deeply personal level. Jones wasn't just a preacher, he was a symbol of hope. Stories of people turning their lives around after attending his church became a regular feature in religious news outlets. His influence extended far beyond the pulpit. He was sought after for motivational speeches, interviews, and spiritual guidance by some of the biggest names in entertainment and politics. His charisma was undeniable, and at one point, it seemed there was no ceiling to his success. But as the saying goes, the higher you rise, the further you fall. Behind the scenes, cracks were beginning to appear. Financial mismanagement whispers started circulating among church members. Questions arose about the handling of donations, the transparency of church projects, and even the personal decisions of Bishop Jones himself. People who once defended him passionately began to voice doubts quietly at first, and then more openly. By the late 2010s, those small cracks had grown into visible fractures. Parishioners who had invested their trust, time, and money into the church were beginning to feel uneasy. And yet, for many, Bishop Jones remained untouchable, a man whose reputation seemed immune to scandal, until everything changed. The story of Bishop Noel Jones's church collapse didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, painful unraveling that took years of missteps, internal disputes, and growing public scrutiny. For decades, the City of Refuge Church was considered a spiritual haven, a place where people felt welcomed, inspired, and motivated to transform their lives. But beneath the surface, tension was brewing. It began with financial instability. Multiple sources close to the church revealed that donation records and project budgets were not always transparent. Large sums of money, intended for outreach programs, church expansions, or charitable efforts, seemed to disappear or be redirected without clear explanations. Congregants who had once given freely began asking questions, only to be met with vague answers or assurances that everything was under control. Over time, trust eroded, and murmurs of mismanagement turned into open criticism. Simultaneously, leadership disputes became more pronounced. Assistant pastors and board members reportedly clashed with Bishop Jones over decision-making, the allocation of resources, and the direction of the church. Some members claimed that voices of dissent were suppressed, creating an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. For a community built on faith and spiritual guidance, these internal battles were deeply unsettling. Then came the most shocking blow. Public perception began to shift dramatically. Once revered as a wise and untouchable spiritual leader, Bishop Jones found himself under scrutiny from former followers and the media alike. Social media, which had once been a platform to broadcast his inspirational messages, became a space where criticisms, allegations, and rumors circulated rapidly. Hashtags questioning his integrity started trending, and church attendance began to drop. The collapse wasn't just financial or organizational. it was emotional. Longtime members expressed feelings of betrayal and confusion, saying that the church they had devoted decades to had become unrecognizable. What was once a sanctuary of hope now felt unstable and unsafe. And just when it seemed things couldn't get worse, more revelations about Bishop Jones' personal decisions came to light, further shaking the community's faith. But the story doesn't end with finances or leadership struggles. There's a deeper, more personal side to this crisis that few expected, involving choices and controversies that made even the most loyal followers question their trust in him. While financial mismanagement and leadership disputes weakened the foundation of Bishop Noel Jones's church, it was his personal controversies that truly shook his followers to the core. For decades, Jones had cultivated an image of spiritual integrity and moral authority. He was seen as a father figure, a guide, and a man whose life embodied the teachings he preached. But cracks in that image began to emerge, and once hidden details started coming to light, leaving many wondering if they had been following the wrong person all along. One of the most persistent controversies revolves around allegations of favoritism and improper relationships within the church. Multiple sources have suggested that certain individuals close to Bishop Jones received special treatment, preferential positions, or access to resources that ordinary congregants could never obtain. While some dismissed these as rumors, over time the sheer number of accounts began to paint a troubling picture of favoritism that undermined the church's credibility. Adding to the tension were questions about his lifestyle. Bishop Jones, while respected for his spiritual guidance, was also criticized for living a life that many considered extravagant for a religious leader. Lavish trips, expensive gifts, and reports of personal indulgences fueled skepticism about whether the values preached from the pulpit matched his personal actions. Critics argued that these choices created a disconnect between the pastor and the people he was supposed to serve, eroding trust in ways that no sermon could repair. Social media played a pivotal role in amplifying these controversies. Former congregants and whistleblowers began sharing their experiences online, stories of exclusion, manipulation, and disillusionment. Some recounted instances where they felt silenced for asking questions, while others revealed shocking inconsistencies between Bishop Jones's public persona and private behavior. Each new post or video sparked debates, drawing more attention to a church already in crisis. Perhaps the most damaging revelations, however, were those that touched on Bishop Jones's accountability. People started asking, who was truly overseeing the pastor's actions? How transparent was he with the board and congregation? And when these questions went unanswered, frustration turned into disillusionment. For many, it became clear that trust, once broken, would not be easily restored. This was the tipping point, the moment where admiration and faith began turning into doubt and distrust. Members who had once looked to him for guidance now questioned his decisions, and a growing number of people started leaving the church altogether. The spiritual leader who had once inspired thousands now faced a crisis that was deeply personal, organizational, and public all at the same time. But even amid this storm, there were unexpected developments that further intensified the controversy, and what came next would shock even those who had grown skeptical. As the controversy surrounding Bishop Noel Jones grew, it was inevitable that the story would reach the broader public. What had started as whispers among congregants soon became headlines, and the media spotlight shone on every decision, every statement, and every aspect of his leadership. For a man who had long commanded respect and admiration, this sudden scrutiny was both unprecedented and unforgiving. The first wave of media attention came from religious news outlets reporting on the church's declining attendance and financial irregularities. These reports were followed by investigative pieces that questioned the transparency of the church's operations, as well as the personal conduct of its leader. Social media amplified the narrative, with hashtags, viral posts, and trending discussions painting a picture of a church in crisis. Followers who had once defended Bishop Jones fiercely were now sharing their own experiences, some of them heartbreaking, others deeply critical. Television interviews, podcasts, and online videos further fueled public curiosity. Experts in ministry and church leadership weighed in, analyzing the impact of the collapse on the community and the broader implications for faith leaders in America. Every new revelation, from financial mismanagement to allegations of favoritism, was dissected, debated, and shared across millions of screens. For Bishop Jones, every day became a battle for reputation, with the media acting as both judge and amplifier. But the fallout wasn't just about headlines. The crisis deeply affected the congregation. Families who had dedicated decades to the church began questioning whether their loyalty had been misplaced. Former members spoke openly about their disillusionment, describing feelings of betrayal, frustration, and loss. Community programs that had once been thriving struggled to survive without the confidence and support of the very people they served. The church's social influence, which had once been immense, began to erode rapidly. Amidst all this, Bishop Jones faced a difficult choice: to confront the media and address the controversies head-on or retreat and hope the storm would pass. Public statements were carefully worded, but critics argued that they lacked sincerity and failed to address the deeper issues. Each press release, interview, or sermon became an opportunity for scrutiny, with the court of public opinion becoming as influential as any congregation member. And just when it seemed the situation couldn't become more damaging, further revelations emerged, ones that cast an even darker shadow over his reputation. These weren't just rumors or speculation. These were first-hand accounts, financial documents, and personal testimonies that painted a vivid picture of a church struggling not only with leadership issues, but with trust at its very core. The stage was now set for the most dramatic chapter in this saga: the personal and spiritual consequences of losing the faith of thousands, and the long-term impact this collapse might have on Bishop Noel Jones's legacy. The collapse of Bishop Noel Jones' church has not only shaken his public image, but has had profound spiritual and emotional repercussions for both him and his congregation. For decades, parishioners looked to him as a source of guidance, comfort, and inspiration. When trust in a spiritual leader erodes, it can create a ripple effect that touches every aspect of the community. And in this case, the effects were devastating. For the congregation, the emotional toll has been immense. Longtime members who had devoted their lives to the church described feelings of betrayal, heartbreak, and disillusionment. Some spoke of sleepless nights, spiritual confusion, and the struggle to reconcile their faith with the actions of their leader. Families who had planned their lives around the church's programs, missions, and support networks suddenly found themselves questioning where they truly belonged. Many reported a deep sense of loss, not just of a place of worship, but of a spiritual home and a guiding moral compass that had defined their lives. Even those who remained in the church were affected. Fear, doubt, and mistrust became pervasive, making it difficult to fully engage in worship or community activities. The once unified congregation began to fragment, with factions forming around different interpretations of the events or differing levels of forgiveness for the pastor. In some cases, small prayer groups became arenas of conflict, with members openly debating the morality and decisions of Bishop Jones, sometimes in heated arguments that left lingering resentment. For Bishop Noel Jones himself, the impact has been equally profound. A man who spent his life guiding others through faith suddenly found himself under scrutiny and judgment. Reports indicate that he has struggled to maintain his usual confidence and authority, facing isolation from those who were once his closest advisors. The emotional strain of public criticism, combined with the personal guilt or defensiveness that often accompanies such a crisis, has placed him in a position few leaders ever face, confronting his own fallibility while navigating the very human consequences of lost trust. The crisis also forced him to confront the spiritual side of leadership. Many in the ministry argue that trust is the foundation of any faith community. Once it is broken, no sermon, speech, or act of charity can fully restore it. For Bishop Jones, this means not only dealing with external criticism, but also wrestling with internal questions about accountability, transparency, and the ethical responsibilities of his role. Meanwhile, the emotional impact on former congregants has spilled into the public domain. Social media posts, blogs, and videos from disillusioned members often describe the pain of realizing that someone they considered a spiritual guide may have fallen short of the ideals he preached. These accounts have created a broader conversation about the responsibility of religious leaders, the vulnerability of followers, and the dangers of unchecked authority in spiritual communities. Despite all this, some supporters still stand by Bishop Jones, believing that every leader faces trials and that redemption is possible. However, the question remains: can the trust of thousands, built over decades, ever be fully restored? Or has the collapse of his church permanently altered the legacy of a man once considered untouchable? Looking ahead, the future of Bishop Noel Jones and his church is uncertain. After decades of leadership, influence, and spiritual guidance, he now faces a critical question. Can the foundation of trust, once fractured, ever be rebuilt? The answer is far from simple, and it will depend on a combination of transparency, accountability, and the willingness of both the pastor and the congregation to confront hard truths. Some experts in ministry and church leadership argue that redemption is possible, but only if Bishop Jones is willing to acknowledge the mistakes that led to this collapse. Public apologies, transparent financial reporting, and a restructuring of leadership roles could be initial steps toward rebuilding faith, not just in his church, but in his personal integrity. However, even these measures are no guarantee. Trust once broken is difficult to repair, and the wounds felt by disillusioned members may take years, if not decades, to heal. For the congregation, the path forward is equally complex. Many are faced with a dilemma: stay and attempt to rebuild the community they once loved, or leave and seek spiritual guidance elsewhere. Each choice carries emotional and spiritual consequences. Those who stay will have to navigate ongoing skepticism, reconcile past disappointments, and actively participate in reforming a system that previously failed them. Those who leave face the painful reality of abandoning a spiritual home and finding a new place of belonging. In parallel, social media and public perception continue to play a major role. Even if internal reforms are enacted, the narrative that has spread online is difficult to counter. Videos, posts, and articles questioning Bishop Jones's credibility have millions of views, and for new or prospective members, these stories may be their first impression of the church. Any attempt at rebuilding trust must contend with the reality that public opinion has shifted dramatically. Yet, there are glimmers of hope. Some longtime supporters continue to speak out, emphasizing the positive impact Bishop Jones has had over the years. They argue that while mistakes were made, the core message of faith, inspiration, and community should not be discarded. In many cases, these advocates have become key voices in attempts to mediate between the pastor and disillusioned members, promoting dialogue and reconciliation. Redemption, however, is not guaranteed. The path is fraught with challenges, and the consequences of past actions linger, like shadows over every decision. Bishop Jones must navigate not only the expectations of his remaining followers, but also the scrutiny of critics, media, and the broader faith community. Every sermon, every statement, and every action now carries weight far beyond what it ever did before. What makes the situation even more compelling is the human element, the very real emotions, struggles, and hopes of thousands of people whose lives were intertwined with the church. This isn't just a story of financial mismanagement or leadership disputes. It's a story about trust, faith, community, and the complexity of human fallibility. Whether Bishop Noel Jones can restore that trust, regain his spiritual authority, and repair his legacy remains one of the most intriguing and closely watched stories in modern religious circles.